tragically cut short during the height of a referendum on the European Union, one for which she was campaigning vigorously on the pro-EU side by a crazed lone assassin. But I'm not talking about Jo Cox, I'm talking about Anna Lindh. Yes, as people who have been following the topsy-turvy Brexit referendum in the UK may know by now, yes, Jo Cox was murdered over the weekend, as I'm sure we've heard many times from the mainstream media, by someone who was shouting about Britain first and clearly a crazy pro-Brexiter who was crazed about her pro-EU stance. But despite all of the holes in that story, let's just focus on the fact of the eerie coincidence, the eerie similarities between Jo Cox's story and that of Anna Lindh. And for those who don't know it, it is being reported even a little bit in the mainstream media that's just cocking an eyebrow and calling it weird that this coincidence is happening. But yes, just 13 years ago in Sweden, basically the exact same thing happened, and we can get that from many different places. We'll get it here from SputnikNews.com. History repeating, Cox's death gets Swedes to remember Lindh and Palm. Labour MP Jo Cox died after being shot and stabbed multiple times after a constituency meeting in West Yorkshire. The murder may become a turning point in the Brexit campaign and provide the UK vote on continued EU membership with an unexpected denouement. Remarkably, the Swedish vote on the euro in 2003 was tarnished by the murder of then Foreign Minister Anna Lindh of the Social Democrat Party, which was carried out in a similar way and under similar circumstances. Anna Lindh was stabbed to death on September 13, 2003, in the final stretch of the pro-Euro campaign, preceding a referendum on joining the Eurozone. The murderer was a young man named Mihailo Mialovic. Born in Sweden to Serb parents, Mialovic was still troubled by the Yugoslav Civil War, where Lindh had a definite and anti-nationalist view. Despite the fact that the murder of Anna Lindh was never classified as a political act, Mialovic admitted he felt hatred for all politicians, Swedish and Serbian alike. Well, very interesting. So, yes, the mainstream media is noting the similarities, but just kind of cocking an eyebrow. It is interesting to note that in the case of Sweden, they went on to hold that referendum, and in fact, they still went ahead and the anti-EU side won in that case. Sweden did not join the euro currency, so it still uses the kroner. However, the next year, 2004, Sweden did start its accession into the European Union. So it is a European Union member now, but not a member of the euro currency zone, exactly like the UK. So, very interesting coincidences, and, well, it remains to be seen exactly how this is going to play out, but the headlines are already screaming that, in fact, the pro-Remain side is pulling ahead as a result of these latest developments. You can find out more about this and, in fact, all of the Brexit developments in our Brexit Open thread on CorbettReport.com, where we talk extensively about the Anna Lindh case and Jo Cox and how it all relates. But we also, as you might remember from last week, have an Orlando shooting open source investigation that now has 165 comments and growing. And these are not tiny little comments; these are substantial comments with lots of links and commentary and analysis. So I suggest you check out the whole thread. But today I want to add to that thread by noting, the interesting developments over the weekend with Loretta Lynch, the head of the Department of Justice, going out on a Sunday media blitz and affirming time and time again that the FBI was going to release the transcripts of the conversation between Omar Mateen and the 911 emergency operators, where he pledges allegiance to ISIS, except it was going to be a transcript, not the actual recordings, and they were going to be heavily edited to remove any reference to ISIS. So TruStream Media put together a nice little compilation of her appearances on the Sunday morning talk show circuit over the weekend.
Can you give us a teaser of what exactly we're going to learn in these transcripts about the killer?
Well, good morning, Dan, and thank you for having me. Tomorrow, we will be releasing a partial transcript of the killer's conversations from within the nightclub. Tomorrow, for example, we'll be releasing a partial transcript of the calls between the killer and the hostage negotiators the night of the attack. So tomorrow, we will be releasing limited transcripts of the killer's calls with law enforcement from from inside the club so that people can, in fact, see the type of interaction that was had. So it will be a partial transcript of those calls. There were 3 calls, and we'll be releasing that partial transcript tomorrow. I say partial because we're not going to be, for example, broadcasting his pledges of allegiance. A partial transcript of his calls with the hostage negotiators.
You say partial. What's being left out?
Well, what we're not going to do is further proclaim this individual's pledges of allegiance to terrorist groups. The reason why we're going to limit these transcripts is to avoid re-victimizing those who went through this horror. We are trying not to re-victimize those who went through that horror. This will not be audio. This will be a printed transcript. But again, we're trying to get as much information about this investigation as possible, but we're not going to hear him make his assertions of allegiance and that. It's our goal to be as transparent as possible in this investigation, and we do want to be as transparent as possible in this investigation.
Well, you can go on and continue watching the rest of that video. I think Truth Through Media did a good version here, capturing the Orwellian nature of that real media blitz that she went on, trying to proclaim this to everyone. It was quite amazing, just the way that was released to the public. And then, of course, there was a outcry. Why aren't they releasing the full transcript? So, on Monday, they just released the full transcript, which is interesting to me because clearly this seems like a psyop to me. We're not going to release the parts about Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. We're not going to release the parts about ISIS. And that becomes the big news story. And then they release it. Oh, okay, he pledged allegiance to ISIS, and here it is. Now you can read about it. And, of course, read about it because, again, they're not releasing the full details. They're just releasing the transcript. They're not releasing the audio recording. So here it is on FBI.gov in case you care. I'll put the link in the show notes so that you can go read it. Out of respect for the victims of this horrific tragedy, law enforcement will not be releasing audio of the shooter's 911 calls, nor will law enforcement be releasing audio or transcripts of the calls made by victims at the Pulse nightclub during the incident. But here you go. Here's the transcription. And of course, you can trust this as far as you can throw it, I'm sure. And of course, there are parts of it in Arabic, which is odd for an Afghan, but there are parts of it in Arabic that have been magnanimously translated for you by the FBI. So not only are they transcripts of the phone calls, they're obviously not the what was actually said. So again, so many layers towards this. But as I say, I think the psyop here is we're not going to show that his pledge of allegiance to ISIS. We're not going to show that. We're not going to show that. And of course, then that becomes the big talking point. And then they release it and, oh, here it is. Okay, yes, he pledged allegiance to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi of the Islamic State. There it is. So it's clearly ISIS-inspired Islamic terrorism, and it feeds back into the whole propaganda of the entire war on terror narrative that this is not in any way manipulated by the intelligence agencies that always have their fingers in every single terrorist pie that pops up. No, it's all these crazed lone shooters who suddenly out of nowhere grow out of the soil and pledge their allegiance to the Islamic State. So I think this is just a psyop to further the real main thrust of this narrative. And again, it works on either side of the political spectrum. The left get to go on their anti-gun parades, and the right get to go on their anti-Muslim parades, and no one at all talks about the FBI connections to this case, except, of course, the people in the Orlando shooting open source investigation thread. So there are links, as I say, talking about the connections of Mateen himself and his father to the intelligence agencies and what that might mean. So I think that's really the excluded part of all of this. And on a lighter note, I guess, if there is any light note here, you might remember my video last week just announcing this open source investigation into the Orlando shooting. I mentioned that it turned out Mateen was a registered Democrat, so I mentioned in passing, I wonder if he was going to vote for Hillary. Well, actually, we apparently now know this from a Washington Post article by Mohammed Malik. I reported Omar Mateen to the FBI. Trump is wrong that Muslims don't do our part. Well, just go here and Control F Hillary. We talked about the presidential election and debated our views of the candidates that were running. He liked Hillary Clinton, and I liked Bernie Sanders. So we literally have, according to the official story, this is the actual official story of this shooting, a gay Muslim Democrat, Hillary